What is going on, guys? Morris here, and in this video we're going to be talking about my album Sweet Story of Mine. Now you guys are probably wondering when this video is being filmed. It is actually September 23rd, 2024. The 2-year anniversary of my album Sweet Story of Mine being released, and I thought what would be a better day than to reflect on the album and talk about the process of the new album while we're at it. So the first thoughts that come to my mind when I think about Sweet Story of Mine, one thing is my debut album, so that's always going to hold such a special place, but also it's the first time I think I truly wrote music from the heart. It truly is the first time I really learned how to write music from real life situations and learned how to tell different parts about that story in each individual song. Looking back on the production of the album, I've spoken about a lot in the Sweet Talking Pod episode, but the one thing I look back on is that it was just cathartic. They always say the first heartbreak is always the hardest. That was the first time I truly felt heartbreak. Even though it was very small situation and scale, at that time it was just so massive to me, and I was just so, frustrated and angry and sad and happy weirdly at the same time, that I was so full of emotions that I just had to write it all out into the album. And looking back on it, it was just a great process of the 14 songs. Well, it started out as 11 songs, then it became 14 songs, and then obviously the deluxe being 20. Obviously it changed shape over time, but the fact that it was this concept telling this real story, but blowing it up a little bit, making it a little bit more theatrical, was definitely a fun experience looking back on it. And it's just fun to listen to, looking back to me a couple years ago and how I went about songwriting. It's hard to pick my favorite song because it changes every day. If I had kids, I'm sure it'd be like picking a favorite child. Each song is so special. It tells its own story, its own version, its own genre. But if I had to pick, I always say my baby, Play Your Cards. The literal final song to make the album. It was written literally as the deluxe album was being finalized, and I just had this idea. Just one day I was just frustrated, and I said, I just need to write this out. And I literally looked to my friend and I said, I'm gonna write a punk rock song. He was like, okay, sure. And then an hour later, Play Your Cards existed, and he was like, oh, nice. That song is just so much fun to sing. It's actually a workhorse to sing. For a while, it was the hardest song of mine to sing. I think it's been topped. It's like a marathon to sing it, but it's just such a fun song. And I remember writing it, and I remember listening back to the first demo and just being like, oh, I think I've struck gold with this one. It's one of those songs where you just can't wait for the world to hear it. And the 3 or 4 months in between writing it and when the deluxe album came out was like the longest 4 months of my life, because I was just so ready for people to hear the song and experience it. And I'm glad that people have loved it as much as they have. If I had to pick my favorite song from the base album, the main 14, it's always hard, but and not to be like cheesy, but I think like the first song, Signs. It's either the first song or the last song. Signs is so special because even now in life, I try to make it a point to not ignore what's in front of you, being present in the moment and not letting the moment escape you, and take carpe diem, seize the day. And I think about that when I sing Signs. It's just kind of like always making sure you're present every day and seeing what's in front of you, because you don't want to let the moment pass you by. But also, it's the final song, One of a Kind, because it's also something that I hold true to my heart, which is, look, unless you do something so morally bad to me that I just can't get past it, I never want to be on bad terms with anyone. And with this situation especially, it was always like, no, there's no like animosity, there's no hatred, there's no bad feelings at all. It's like I literally, like, it's nothing. It's just like we're good, and like say, hey, I always kind of say, if for some reason you're in my town and you get stuck on the side of the road, don't think, should I call him, should I not call? Looking back on the story, A Sweet Story of Mine, so, I always say, you never want to discredit your feelings or anything, but there definitely was a evolution in the story that the album is based around. It was this concept album, it tells a story over 20 songs. In retrospect, the situation that the album tells about did not last very long. It was like a couple months, and it just kind of was something that just kind of faded away. But, at that time, it just kind of got a hold of me in a weird way, and I wrote all this music, and I'm thankful for the music. So, I always say, I'm like, Will, did you really need to blow it up like that? No, but we got my first album out of it. I'm pretty all right with how Lil Will was thinking. I've thought about going back and tweaking a couple songs because, just naturally, I was just starting to learn how to use this software at the time of making this album. So there are some things in the production that I wish I could go back and change now that I have learned so much over the past couple years. That music is so pure, and in that moment, to me, even if I went and fixed it, and yes, it would maybe sound better, I would know the difference, but a lot of people probably wouldn't. You know, it's just like, is it worth taking it out of that innocence that it's in? It's so innocent when it was recorded back in 2022. Why go back a couple years later where the emotions in the songs are not there like they were when I recorded them back then? You know, I've had time to separate. I've lived more life. I've had more life experiences. So the songs emotionally, I think you hear a lot of emotion in the lyrics and how I sing those. And I'm not sure you would get the same raw emotions. Like, I can act it, but I don't want to act it. I want it to be raw and real. And I'm not sure you would get that if I went and tweaked these songs here in 2024, 2025. It just wouldn't work. So maybe at some point down the line, there's a reason I'll need to. But for right now, yeah, you know, it's an intrusive thought that comes in about what if I wouldn't fix it? But at the end of the day, the album came out in 2022 or 2023, whichever way you want to say it. And that's how it should belong. It's the album that came out then. I meant when I said after Sweet Story of Mine, that was it with albums until I had a real reason business-wise to write another album. I didn't believe that it was needed. I didn't believe that there was enough stories to tell, enough music to tell. And I was writing a lot of music, but it wasn't really going together. And it really didn't have a message. And I don't want to have an album that's just a compilation of songs I'm working on. You know, maybe an EP or something, but I wanted an album to tell a story, to tell a message, to connect in a special way. And I wasn't doing anything music-wise or business-wise that would call for an album to be made. So I was at peace for a couple years not working on an album and not planning. I always said I wouldn't really do it until, you know, whether it was a record deal or just business-wise, there was a hunger and a thirst for an album. And I'll be like, all right, now let's get in the studio, figure out what that story is, and then tell the story. But obviously, things seem to have changed. The thing that drove me away from wanting to make another album after Sweet Story is especially for Sweet Story of Mine's case, it was 20 songs, and they're not singles. There's only 2 singles released from the album. You Keep Me Going and Find the Truth. No singles for like 6 months, then the album dropped. Then you had a single that wasn't even connected to the album that came out in between with Live a Lie. And you had a Christmas song that came out in between the base album and the deluxe album. And that was 18 songs that didn't get a spotlight. Now, yes, Play Your Cards got a spotlight, Tie It Up got a spotlight, and other songs had moments. But none of them really got to shine. I think there's so many songs on the album that would have worked if they had their time to shine. And some of them have still done well, regardless of not being a single, like In My Head, Scars are really good, Anytime, What I Never Knew. Like, there's several that have done really well, and people really like them and have found them. Giving You Up is another one. And, you know, it's just 18 songs that, you know, for me, I pour my sweat, tears, and hours of my life into these songs, and for majority of them to kind of go unheard unless by diehard people that really want to hear these songs, it kind of grabs at your heart a little bit. And that's the kind of day and age we're at now with albums. It's a lot of, even for a bigger artist, it's harder for them to justify making an album, because if it's not a single, if it's not blowing up on TikTok or Reels or whatever, that deep cut might just go unheard. So obviously when it came to making this album, it came from a spot of I had a couple things happen in my life during mid 2024, and it just kind of spurred on some music, and I knew I was honing in on my sound. I had done Love Shy, written Does She Know, I had written Runaway, and I was like, all right, I'm getting close. Like, I think I'm there, but I just need to crack it a little bit more, and I'm going to find like the genre and style that suits me. And so, you know, life happens over time, and then I wrote the song called I Don't Like My Mind. And in that moment, I was like, I like this. I think this is going to be different from what I've done before, but similar enough to where you can connect it with the rest. But I think it was a good avenue in. And then a few weeks later, I wrote What Are We? A few weeks later, I wrote Sunglasses. And then a couple weeks later, I had this kind of sit down with myself, and I said, you got 3 songs here. And I had ideas for a lot more. And I knew there was a story to tell. And I said, I think I'm working on an album. And I literally, like, to myself and went, no, we're not. We're not doing another album. Absolutely not. This is not happening. You know, it took some time, some thought, some prayer, and listening to some podcasts of songwriters talking about making albums like Ryan Tedder and Joe Jonas and more. You know, I kind of just became a vacuum of artist opinions, and I realized that I had an album in my hands, and it was tugging at my heart that I had a story that needed to be told. So on July 11th, 2024, standing under Griffin at Busch Gardens, I said, I'm doing the album. It was literally that simple. And looking back on it, I'm so glad I made that decision. Business-wise, making another album still doesn't make sense, but if you let the business numbers rule creativity, it can ruin you. And I knew I had all these stories in my mind. Like at the time, it was, a song about my journey with faith, weight loss, how I approach love, how I see the world, how I see the way we find love. And, writing, and then those spurring on songs like Getting Old to Me, 4D, Diet Off You. And at the time, other songs like Till the Wheels Fall Off. I had so many song ideas, and I knew I wanted to sing about life. I'm in my mid-20s, still figuring out, I have a pretty solid hold on who I am as a person, and I wanted to write an album for people that are still figuring out life and still figuring out different avenues and different parts of their life, and hopefully this album can reach them, and even if they don't feel the exact same way, they can see, oh, I'm not alone in these thoughts, and see that there is someone else that, has felt the same thing they have felt. And, we still have our good days and bad days, and that's what this album is about. It's about having your good days, your bad days, and just persevering and, being present in every moment. Like I said, business-wise, it still didn't make sense. Financially, it didn't make sense. You just got to kind of know when you pray about it, and you just kind of feel in your heart and your mind that you're like, you're going to do yourself and possibly the world a disfavor if you don't go forth and tell these stories. And so that's what I did. I decided just to kind of hunker down and write this album. The writing process for this album compared to Sweet Story of Mine is a lot different. It's actually very different. Sweet Story of Mine, I kind of just sat with myself and wrote songs every day for like a week. And the base album pretty much came together in like a week, and then a few other songs a few weeks later. And it came together really quickly. It was just kind of me writing what was in my headspace. So these songs really weren't super, deep in the mindscapes. They just pretty much told everything how it was. And for this album, I wanted it to be a little bit more visual. I wanted it to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek at times with how we do double entendres and stuff. And writing this album, like the other album, I didn't really write anything. But this time around, I have this journal, and I have written down pages on pages on pages of stuff in here. And sometimes I'll write songs and then I'll write the idea in here, but a lot of times I've written the idea in here, and it might be the same day, it might be the next day, it might be a few weeks later, I will go back and read it again and write a song about it. And that has been so fulfilling, and I have enjoyed it so much, and I love going back and reading these moments, because when you write a song, you're capturing a moment in time, and to go back and read how I was feeling in these different moments and different emotions that I was feeling, it was like, okay, I have a better grasp on how to tell this story or tell this side of my life than if I just sat with my mind and went, all right, what are we going to do? Like, all right, what are we writing here? So for this album, it was a lot more visual, and I'm taking my time with it. There's no rush. Like, I have deadlines of when we need to have the music done. But compared to Sweet Story, where pretty much every song made the album, like, yes, there are 7 songs that are unreleased from Sweet Story of Mine. They were never in consideration. The 14 that made the base album were always going to be the 14. Only one song got cut. And for the 20-song album, all those songs just made it on. There was no deliberation of which ones do and which ones don't. It was, you're all on the album. Congratulations, you made it. This time around, the track list is shorter. We're not doing 14 for the bass. It's going to be, 12, 13, and then a couple for a deluxe album, not 20. Writing about 30 songs for this album, that means over half the songs that were written are cut. And will they live on as singles? I don't know. This is September. The album is still being written. I haven't finished writing the album. I'm at 23, 24 songs right now. I know the ideas for the songs to kind of finish up the writing process. But, we're going to go into this production process with 30 songs. And, then cut it down. It's going to be a big task, but it's going to make, in contrast to Sweet Story, where every song made the album, and sometimes you would have songs that almost were the same message, but because I just said every song makes it, every song made it, this time there might be 2 songs that sound similar, and you pick the best one. You pick the one that tells the story better, the one that sounds better, the one that, you think will connect with others better. Because I make music for myself, I don't make music for others. But you do have to take a little bit of business side into consideration and be like, all right, what will people think? How will people perceive this song? That's a better way to say it, because you want to make sure that your message is clear. One big thing I learned from Sweet Story of Mine that I know I will implement here is the promotion. Sweet Story of Mine, there was not a whole lot of promotion for it, and the promotion I did do for it, it was more targeted at the real life situation than promoting the music. And that wasn't right. That wasn't fair to the situation, the people involved in the situation. That wasn't fair to the music. That was just beautiful music that was kind of being, hey, you're putting this target on our back, and we didn't ask for this. We're just songs. And this time around, a lot of these songs are just about me and about my headspace, but there are songs that are about situations with other people in real life. But it's never about the other people. It's never about the situation. It's about, how did I deal with the situation? How is my viewpoint? And that's the thing, is separating real life from the music. Yes, music tells stories from real life, but there is a disconnect. If you just tell real life, it's boring. No one cares. That's kind of a motto we learned in film school. If you just write a real conversation how two people would have one, it's boring, because everyone has those. So you'd rather take a situation and design it in a new way and kind of just go into the writing and really figure out how to tell it in an interesting way, in a way that hasn't been done before, because you don't want to spin a wheel that's already been spun 1,000 times. So writing this album is truly making sure the music is put first and nothing else. Nothing like, I don't like my mind. We don't want to, the story behind the song is not important. What is important is the song. So in all promotion material, I was promoting the song. And I don't think fondly of those who put targets on other people's backs through the music, because that's not what music is for. Music is to be a release. It's to be an escape, and not a weapon. Music should never be a weapon. For me, music is just supposed to be a time where you can zone out from real life and enjoy that time to yourself and, kind of escape. And that's what I want this music to be. And so yeah, I would say the big thing is make sure the music is put first. Yeah, the music on this album is a lot different than Sweet Story of Mine. Sweet Story of Mine, kind of the theme behind it, especially the deluxe version, was I called it a musical extravaganza. It was 14 songs, 20 songs with different genres spanning across each song. If you listen to it from top to bottom for the first time, you wouldn't know what genre is coming next. You got rock, you got pop, you got country, you got a little bit of R&B, you got a little bit of hip hop, just a little bit. You got some jazz. You had all these different genres that were thrown together, but somehow they kind of sync together. This album, it is all one genre. It is all pop rock. Now, it is like the indie pop rock, and sometimes we lean more into the pop. Sometimes we lean more into the rock. But every song lives in that whirlpool of, this is pop rock music. And that's what I wanted this album to be, is sonically consistent, and this song, and vocally consistent. So, this is the genre I plan to keep my feet in for a while. I'm super excited to keep venturing into the genre, because at the end of the day, this is the music I grew up listening to. So to kind of return to my roots and find my voice, and find my voice through my lyrics and actually vocally through this music, has been the greatest gift of my life. I have never enjoyed making music as much as I have for this album. And, in the whole grand scheme of things, this is still very early on in the album production process, but I can already tell that I cannot wait for the world to hear it. And as you guys are seeing this, the album is just a couple weeks away. It might be the week of the album, so I'm super excited for you guys to hear this music, because it is so freaking awesome. I have stopped cursing in my music and in my content. If I were to perform Sweet Story of Mine again, would I perform the original lyrics for Play Your Cards Tied Up in Peace? And the answer is, I don't know. I did in the full live performance back in February of 2024, but that was before I kind of made the decision to cut back from the cursing. I don't know. If I had to give the answer now, my idea is I've already come up with new replacement lyrics for all 3 songs to sing the clean versions. And the way I see it is, when I do shows, it will be the clean versions. But I would love to do down the line as the fans grow and there's a hunger for Sweet Story Mine, and probably like the diehard fans, you know, feel that sense of ownership over Sweet Story, like this is our album. Kind of like how Jonas Brothers fans feel with It's About Time, that album that kind of came before The Storm, but they kind of feel a sense of ownership and pride over it that not a whole lot of people know about it. I think Sweet Story Mine will become that one day, and I would love to do like a very intimate, small venue, you know, like 100, 200 people, and just do like a little, maybe like a one night only, maybe jump around in cities. Like this is years down the line, you know, when hopefully I'm touring and doing bigger venues, do like real intimate venues and perform the album top to bottom, and it'd be like Sweet Story Night. And there I would probably perform the songs in their original form just for that night, because that's for the fans who really love the album and cherish the album just like I do. And you know, that's how I was feeling in the moment. That's how I felt at that time in my life. So, you know, for that event, I would definitely probably sing the original lyrics for the 3 songs on the album that were explicit. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this little retrospective, reflective look into Sweet Story Mine 2 years later on this beautiful September 23rd, 2024. I'm super excited for you guys to hear this album that I'm working on. It's coming together beautifully. The music is just, it's so deeply personal. I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. I know you guys are going to love it. And I listen to it every day, just thinking, man, I wish I could just have all the songs finished and have it out to you guys tomorrow. But, you know, we got a long road ahead, and I'm super excited to go on this journey with this album, and I hope you guys will join me as we're getting close to the release of the album as the time you're watching this. And probably by the time you're watching this, there's already been more promo done for the album than I did for Sweet Story Mine in its entire release run. So, woohoo! But thank you all for watching, and my name is Will Morris, and I'm out. Peace.
Just wanna go. I got my foot on the